Hello, hello. This is Listen to Tony with me, Anthony Olensky. Today is Wednesday, October 25th, 11:10 a.m. Good morning. Quote for today is the following: Do not fear the winds of adversity. Remember, a kite rises against the wind rather than with it. Who said this? Unknown, of course. But yeah, I'm gonna let that settle with you. Yeah, winds of adversity. So I guess if there's something blown at you, that means you're gonna rise up, right? Like a kite. One article today, a bit on the, I guess, slightly different topic because we're gonna talk about psychology. This is from Rob Henderson's newsletter on Substack. And the title, I haven't read the article yet, so I don't know what to expect, but the title made me want to read this out to you. Understanding the Young Male Syndrome. That's the title. Let's dive in, right? This is, I think it's, so yeah, he explains it. So below is a transcript of a lecture I recently delivered at the University of Richmond. So if you haven't been at the University of Richmond when he was giving that lecture, I will read it out to you. For their special speaker series, they had a special speaker series, Masculinity in a Changing World. So he says his thank you, whatever. It's a capacity psychologist, author to speak about social scientists that have termed young male syndrome. Behind such concepts, okay, so I'm gonna now read this out properly. So behind such concepts as the one we're gonna discuss today, the young male syndrome, are flesh and blood human beings with their own unique stories and experiences. Psychology and the social sciences, more broadly, are useful for understanding aggregate patterns and identifying the causes and effects behind them. But it can fall short when it comes to acknowledging the depth and rich complexity of people's actual lives. So, before I delve into the theoretical and empirical work underlying the young male syndrome, I'll begin by just briefly speaking about my own unusual life. Unusual, okay. Which can be understood through the origins of my name, Robert Kim Henderson. All three of my names were taken from different adults. Robert comes from my supposed biological father. Until recently, the only information I had about him is his name from a document provided by a social worker responsible for my case when I was a foster child. Oof. I recently took a 23andMe DNA test and discovered that I am half Hispanic and on my father's side. Okay. I'm curious, why do people even take these tests? Like, what does this information change in your life? Like, say I take a test and I discover that I'm half Brazilian, like on my mom's side. So what? Anyway, and you spend $100 on this or more? But I think I'm gonna still do it. It's cool. Oh, whatever. So my name Kim comes from my biological mother, who had moved from South Korea to Los Angeles, where I was born. Kim was her family name. She succumbed to drug addiction, rendering her unable to care for me, and I was subsequently placed in the foster care system in LA. Okay, I take that back. Like, he had an unusual life, at least the beginning of his life. And my last name, Henderson, it comes from my former adoptive father. After my adoptive mother left him, he severed ties with me in order to hurt her. He figured that my emotional pain from his desertion would be transmitted to my adoptive mother. He was right. Oof. As you might imagine, these were extremely difficult experiences for me. My life temporarily improved. Let's make this bigger. Yeah, you can see me here. My life temporarily improved, though, when my adoptive mother entered a relationship with a woman named Shelley. Together, they created a relatively stable home for my adoptive sister and me during my adolescence in a dusty blue-collar town in Northern California called Red Bluff. When I was in 8th grade, my mom and Shelley bought some lumber when they learned, oh, so he was brought up by lesbians, all right. Bought some lumber when they learned that heating a house with firewood was less expensive than central heating. I spent several hours one afternoon stacking the oak and cedar logs next to our little shed in the backyard. That year, I woke up at 5:30 a.m. every morning to build a fire so that the house would be warm by the time my mom got up to get ready for work at 7 a.m. I did this all winter when temperatures would dip into low 30s. Frosty weather was Californians for Californians. At first, I argued with my mom about my new chore. Shelley calmly replied that she and my mom worked all day to pay the bills, and that helping to keep the house warm was at least I could do as the man of the house. At age 13, this was the first time anyone had ever described me as a man, and I implicitly grasped that it had something to do with responsibility and contribution. I can see that. My hope is that by the end of this discussion of the young male syndrome, we'll have a further understanding of the message my two moms were trying to convey to my 13-year-old self. Of course, there are many ways of understanding that what being a man is about, and there are many valid ways to be a man. However, regardless of how it is expressed, it usually has something to do with strength and toughness and productivity. In his cross-cultural research, the psychologist Martin J. Seeger has found 3 consistent requirements to achieve the status of manhood in various societies around the world. First, the individual must be a fighter and a winner. Second, he must be a provider and protector. And third, he must maintain mastery and control of himself at all times. I like that. Though tough to live up to. Across cultures, going back to the article, there seems to be an implicit understanding of what being a man is. Indeed, in a widely cited study of 25 cultures, including New Zealand, Finland, Zimbabwe, Malaysia, Pakistan, Bolivia, and Trinidad, out of all places, definitions of masculinity and femininity hardly fluctuated at all. As a rule, participants in this study said they did not believe that men and women differed in all respects, and they did not view one sex inherently superior to the other. But in every culture, men were seen as active, adventurous, dominant, forceful, independent, and strong. Contemporary polemicists will rhetorically ask questions like, what is a woman? But seldom does anyone ask, what is a man? People seem to already know. Indeed, many individuals resort to commonplace expressions such as man up or be a man, or more crassly, grow some balls. In polite society, people won't publicly express such remarks, but many will still think them. Men, of course, are responsive to these statements. Yeah, I think when someone says grow some balls, I get the message. In a famous literary illustration, going back to the article, Shakespeare Lady Macbeth reinforces the conception of manhood as strength. Early on in the 17th century play, she receives a letter from her husband. The letter details an encounter with 3 witches and their prophecy that her husband Macbeth will take over the throne from King Duncan. Lady Macbeth is eager for this power and insists that she and her husband must murder the king and themselves in order for this prophecy to come true. Lady Macbeth expresses her concerns, however, when she grows worried about whether her husband will be manly enough to follow through this agreement. Her fears are confirmed when Macbeth, upon reflecting on the consequences of treason, subsequently backs out of the plan. Pussy. No, I'm kidding. Lady Macbeth then persuades her husband when she proclaims that if he were to go through with this murder, then he would not only be a man, but so much more. By dangling the enticing reputation of manliness over her husband, Lady Macbeth succeeds in getting him to kill the king and subsequently setting in motion the chaotic events of the rest of the story. See, it's all the fault of women. Adam and Eve, come on, wake up. Kidding, but like, kind of weird, right? Like, it's always this, like, some chick saying, yo, like, be a man, or like, you're such a pussy, why won't you do this? And then we do these things, and then men are bad, right? Is that what you're trying to say, Rob? Anyway, back to the article. Shakespeare was clearly a keen observer of human nature in general and of men's anxieties about their masculinity in particular. Hear that? If I have any lady listeners, and I hope there are thousands of you, yeah, if you want to get a man to do something, just yeah, play on his anxieties about their masculinity. Going back to the article, such anxieties regarding the belief that manhood is something that must be achieved through action appear to be ubiquitous around the world. I'll offer a few brief examples. On the Greek Aegean islands of Kalimonos, right? I hope I'm saying that right. Kalymnos, whatever. Many of the inhabitants make their living by commercial sponge fishing. The men dive into deep water without the aid of special equipment, which they scorn. Diving is a gamble because many men are stricken and injured. Young divers who take precautions are mocked as effeminate and ridiculed by their peers. Halfway around the world, in the high mountains of Melanesia, I don't know what it is, young boys undergo intense trials before achieving the status of manhood. Young boys are torn from their mothers and forced to undergo a series of brutal masculizing rituals. These include whippings, beatings, and other forms of terror from older men, which the boys must endure stoically and silently. This community believes that without such hazing, boys will never mature into men, but remain weak and childlike. Real men are made, they insist, not born. All right, yeah. Next time you see a 10-year-old kid, make sure you fucking spank him because you're doing something good for the future man that this child is to become. Just imagine you're on the bus, you see some kid. You know what? I'm gonna give a whipping to that kid just to make sure he becomes a real man. Anyway, let's forget about my imagination and whatever I just said. Going back to the article, to this extent, the psychologist Roy Baumeister has pointed out that in many societies, any girl who grows up automatically becomes a woman. Huh. Meanwhile, a boy does not automatically become a man, and instead is often required to prove himself, usually by passing stringent tests or producing more than he consumes. In many, okay, I think that's a very important thing to note. I have nothing to say about this, but it seems kind of true. Yeah. Huh. I guess losing your virginity, becoming a woman. Anyway, in many non-industrialized, small-scale societies, girls are believed to become women when they are physically able to produce children. Oh, I guessed it. The ability to have kids is considered a major contribution to itself to the community. Boys, in contrast, do not have a clear and visible biological indicator of manhood and must often endure culturally sanctioned rituals and painful trials to become men. What about pubic hair and like having a little stash? Your voice changes. You're 6 feet tall. You can dunk a basketball. I think things are changing, but let's see. Let's see what Rob has to say. Indeed, masculinity is widely considered to be an artificially induced status achievable only through testing and careful instruction. Real men do not simply emerge like butterflies from their boyish cocoons. Rather, they must be carefully shaped, nurtured, counseled, and prodded into manhood. The literary critic Alfred Habiger has remarked that masculinity has an uncertain and ambiguous status. It is something to be acquired through a struggle, a painful initiation, or a long and sometimes humiliating apprenticeship. Okay, let's now consider the Mehinaku, an indigenous community located in a remote part of central Brazil. I'm going to dwell on this society at some length because they are explicitly and self-consciously a non-violent society. The Mehinaku go out of their way to maintain peace with neighboring communities that are more aggressive and confrontational. Yet, even this community exhibits familiar patterns regarding cultural conceptions of masculinity and manhood. The Mehinaku reside among impassable streams of waterfalls, making their territory inaccessible to all but the most determined outsiders. They depend on the river and lake fish for protein, and the men are expected to go on long fishing expeditions to distant waters over rough and hazardous terrain, sometimes for days or weeks. The Mehinaku men are very concerned about their manhood. For them, manliness is a status equivalent to the highest social virtue. A man's prestige comes not necessarily from being a good man in some abstract moral sense, but from being good at being a man. This entails living up to the three rules I mentioned before regarding provisioning, protection, and mastery, documented by Martin Seeger. Okay, haven't formulated my thoughts yet on this, but I think it's pretty clear what he's saying. And boy, that would be rough. Me having to go fish for 3 weeks just to prove that I'm a man. Anyway, the Mehinaku men earn their laurels by trying to outperform the others in fishing prowess and in accumulating property, such as tools and other goods. The community judges a man's industriousness, his willingness to go on long and arduous fishing trips to distant lakes and streams, often over treacherous terrain where rival coalitions might ambush and attack them. Ugh. A fear of economic inadequacy haunts these men. They experience intense anxiety about appearing slothful or lethargic. When a man, just not being a pussy, I guess. When a man returns from a dangerous fishing expedition, he's expected to appear immediately in the village plaza where people gather expectantly. He then ostentatiously displays his catch before distributing it unsparingly. The anthropologist David Gilmore, describing the norms within this community, notes that the hallmark of a real man is that he is selfless. He always shares his food. In contrast, men who are stingy are seen as parasitic and despised as freeloaders. By who, you may ask? By women. So, yeah, you better share your shit, because if not, you're a parasite. Go get me some food. Jesus, I think this all comes down to we're just run by women. People say it's a man's world. I'm not sure about that anymore. Going back to the article, the Mehinaku instill a sense of hard work, civic duty, and the conventional understanding of manliness into little boys. For example, we're just being brainwashed, I guess. Who's doing this? Like, why are we doing this? Men and women. I mean, becoming pretty clear. I'm curious if he's going to say that himself. Or maybe I'm just, coming up with some conspiracy theory, but yikes. For example, if a boy sleeps in late or lounges about or refuses to accompany his father on his fishing expedition, he is mocked and called a little girl. Moreover, a boy, just because he wants to chill, he's called a girl, so girls are just supposed to chill? Something is not right here. Anyway, going back to the article, moreover, a boy is often warned that if he's lazy, then when he grows up, he will be undesirable to women. Oh my God! Thus, this community has managed to ignite the cauldron of young male energy and channel it away from warfare with neighboring communities and toward economic productivity, industriousness, and generosity, with a coinciding increase in desirability to potential romantic partners. As I mentioned, the Mehinaku fight no wars and are regarded as a non-violent society. Interestingly, though, they regularly organize wrestling matches in which strict rules of decorum are observed. Their wrestling is known to be spirited and aggressive, but results in few injuries other than minor scrapes and bruises. The men try to defeat one another in these organized contests, and winners receive the respect of their community. All men are expected to wrestle, to give their best effort, and if possible, to win. We're like the gladiators, and chicks are just sitting on the sidelines eating popcorn and saying, "You lazy fuck, go beat up your friend." All right. Avoiding participation in the Mehinaku wrestling matches is considered a severe character deficiency, a betrayal of civic duty. Duty to who? What the fuck? There are matches and exhibitions held every day. The community community demands to know the relative formidability of each man, and these contests provide a low-cost way of revealing this information. Formidability of each man, formidable. Why? Like, seems like women just wrap their like men around their fingers. Indeed, going back to the article. Indeed, some psychologists have suggested that one reason, though not the only reason, that societies have independently devoted athletic competitions is that they serve to advertise the physical qualities of individual males. Contests involving coordination, explosive strength, and physical prowess help to provide clear proxies for capability in hunting and warfare to male observers, and also provide information about romantic mate value to female observers. That is, sports can provide the functional equivalent of courtship displays. That's what it said, right? Okay. David Gilmour, so the anthropologist that he brought up later, a bit earlier, notes that the Mehinaku men engage in these daily contests largely for feminine approval. Yeah, duh. Fuck me. Success at beating other men translates into success in the mating game. Women frequently shout encouragement from the sidelines and express interest in the victors. A man who refuses or who regularly loses these contests experiences what Gilmour describes as social marginalizing and an ever dwindling status. That's sick. You're not able to beat up some other guy. You won't get laid. Ugh. People say that men are fucked up. I mean, who came up with this setup? Anyway, I mean, not judging. We'll speak more about status in a few moments, but for now, let's concentrate on the title. Imagine just if all guys were gay, would they go to prison? Because they wouldn't beat each other up or steal shit to impress women. Oh my god, I think I solved the crime crisis. Whatever. No, forget what I said. The concept of the young male syndrome was developed by the psychologist Margot Wilson and Martin Daly, and it refers to a pattern of risk-taking behavior that is more pronounced in males in their late teens and early 20s relative to other demographic groups. The research that informs this framework suggests that this increased risk-taking is the result of both social and biological factors, including social-cultural pressures and hormonal changes. For instance, testosterone levels for males increase by 800% on average at age 14. Explains a lot. The young male syndrome gives rise to competitiveness and willingness to take physical and reputational gambles, especially when romantic partnership status and territory are at stake. In psychological research, the young male syndrome has been linked with higher rates of aggressive behavior, substance abuse, reckless driving, and other potentially dangerous activities. Of course, this is a generalized pattern, and not all young males exhibit this behavior. Oof, all right. Nevertheless, the sex differences are striking. Let's get into it. A baby born in the U.S. has an astonishingly high risk profile. Men are 3 times more likely to die before the age of 25, 3 times more likely to become addicted to drugs or alcohol, and an incredible 19 times more likely to end up in jail. Fuck. A man is more than twice as likely as a woman to have a car accident and 3 times more likely to be involved in 2 car accidents. I mean, I don't know how this statistic is calculated, but I think anyway, I'm not gonna comment. no, I'm not gonna get there. But just more guys, they drive, right? Anyway, just look at the family. It's usually the dad just driving. Anyway, even so obviously he's gonna get more accidents. Going back to the article, even when not driving, men are more careless. Twice as many men compared with women are killed simply crossing the street. And who's driving a man? His like sick new Beamer shining because he wants to impress a woman. So whose fault is it? Anyway, manless is by far, maleness is by far the biggest risk factor for violence. Men kill men massively more often than women kill women. On average, 26 times more often. Yeah, because men are fucking dumb and are trying to. Okay, I think you got the message. This is just sad. Um, I hope Rob has some silver lining, or maybe this is all a hoax. Or uh, anyway, these patterns extend beyond the U.S. When data on violent crime are gathered from around the world, the result is utterly clear and amazingly consistent. Crime statistics from Australia, Botswana, Brazil, Canada, Denmark, Germany, Iceland, India, Kenya, Mexico, Nigeria, Scotland, Uganda, and the United Kingdom all exhibit the same basic pattern. In each of these societies, without a single exception, young males are by far the most likely to be the perpetrators as well as the victims of murder. Curious if there's any data on more progressive societies, like wherever this, feminism, Me Too, whatever, where like, or this parity, like Nordics, right, where women are supposed to have the same place in society as men, and gender fluid or whatever. Does that change this whole manliness paradigm? I hope he mentions it. Anyway, men get into fights more than women. They play more violent video games, and watch more violent movies. They're more likely to be hospitalized for punching walls. Okay. They're more likely. Who the fuck does that? They're more likely to fantasize about killing another person. Okay, whoa. They're more likely to actually kill another person, and they're more likely to kill themselves. I don't get this fantasized statistic. But is killing another person the same as chopping off their dick? Because if yes, then I think a lot of women fantasize about chopping someone else, some man's dick off. Anyway, going back to the article, and they're more likely to kill themselves. In both the U.S. and the U.K., men are 3 times more likely than women to commit suicide. Globally, this is grim. Globally, more than 90% of homicides are committed by men. As I mentioned, most victims of homicide are also men, about 70%. Interestingly, the figures for chimpanzees are nearly identical. 92% of chimpanzees killers and 73% of chimpanzee victims are males. Homicide is a crime committed mostly by young men from the US to Japan and worldwide generally. Although contingent material and ideological conditions can exacerbate or inhibit the tendency towards violence, the basic evolutionary foundations of this impulse are much older than humanity itself. Modern societies have, to some extent, managed to inhibit male aggression. Violent death rates among hunter-gatherer societies with little or no contact with Western culture exceeded the murder rate recorded in contemporary America. Most crime this is a long sentence. Violent death rates among hunter-gatherer societies with little or no contact with Western culture exceed the murder rate recorded in contemporary America's most crime-ridden cities. In hunter-gatherer societies, roughly 1 in 7 men die as a result of homicide. A global assessment of 31 hunter-gatherer societies found that 64% of them engaged in warfare once every 2 years. Such violent conflicts are carried out almost exclusively by men. In a 2012 paper published in the journal Human Nature, psychologists Aaron Sell, Leanna Hone, and Nicholas Pound wrote that if modern, that's a quote from their article, if modern Western societies had homicide rates as high as some foraging peoples, a male graduate student would be more likely to be killed than to get a tenure track position. To reiterate, for all societies for which there are data, the vast majority of violence is concentrated among men. Okay, got it, yeah. The young male syndrome, of course, specifically concerns young men. In the US, a 20-year-old man is 10 times more likely to be arrested for violent crime than a 60-year-old man. Yeah, because a 60-year-old guy already, does can't get the stick hard and doesn't have to compete to get the interest of women. I guess that's the logical conclusion out of what we read so far. Going back to the article, as I mentioned, most of their targets are also young men. To this extent, the major trigger of young male homicides around the world are what social scientists refer to as trivial altercations. Okay. When they are put down by the other men in public, nearly all young men will experience a flash of rage. Most manage to inhibit it, but some act to extinguish the source of their humiliation. Psychologist Douglas T. Kenrick has written that for young guys, this is a quote, for young guys, being respectful toward toward other young men is probably even more important than a healthy diet to ensure longevity, right? So respect the other dude who you see. That's why I think this whole thing of like bros and like your brother, some people might not like it and see it's toxic masculinity, but I think it kind of helps us with this whole thing of being respectful towards other men because you got to be careful. You never know if like someone is going to jump at you, try to kill you because they think that you disrespected them. So yeah, it's hard to be a man. I could fucking die even today, just for looking the wrong way at someone. Uh, Anyway, violence and crime aside, the impulsivity of young men and the male can be observed in everyday situations. One study found that compared with adults age 55 and older, young adults age 18 and 25 are 2.5 times more likely to press send without first reading over their emails. Classic mistake. Moreover, while 40% of women reported that they checked their emails before sending them, only 25% of men did so. Yeah, that's just just proofread. Better yet, just like sleep over it if you can, but sleep on it. But yeah, going back to the article. To be sure, there are social cultural influences involved here, but environmental factors do not operate on blank slates. To understand young men and young women, you have to take into account not only the cultural context, but also evolved sex differences. Consider the claim that societies encourage males to be aggressive. This is true in some ways. People, especially peers, often send the message to boys that they should be tough. Overall, though, we spend far more time discouraging male aggression compared with female aggression. Why? Because males are generally more aggressive. Or consider the claim that we tell girls to be quiet and passive. Again, we do this sometimes, but more often we tell boys to be quiet and passive. Fucking A, like my whole elementary school. Be quiet, shut the fuck up, sit down, detention. Anyway, going back to the article. Why? For the same reason, boys are on average louder and more disruptive. Research finds that boys are punished more often and more severely for aggression. Overall, males are more aggressive despite culture, not because of it. Okay. So maybe it's not entirely the fault of like women creating a culture of toxic masculinity. Maybe, yeah, probably I was wrong, but maybe not. Let's see. I was once standing in an airport train. Going back, this is Rob saying this. I was once standing in an airport train on my way to another terminal. I saw a woman and her son, who must have been about 4 years old. As the train began moving, she asked the boy to hold on to the train handle. He replied, "I want to surf." He then held his arms out as the train moved, attempting to hold his balance. I could see the mother was nervous and again firmly asked him to hold on to the railing. Despite her admonitions, the boy refused. He maintained his balance though and smiled, clearly pleased with himself at his own success. There you go, my guy. I have no doubt similar stories exist for young girls, but generally speaking, this type of risky behavior and obliviousness to the potential of physical harm is more common among boys. Researchers have found that the trait of what is called surgency, or high activity and impulsivity, shows a large sex difference, with boys scoring higher than girls. These findings likely help to account for the fact that boys experience more disciplinary difficulties in school. A male bent towards risk-taking is partly, though not entirely, a function of environmental incentives and culturally driven socialization. Okay, so actually we're back to the whole socialization thing and like culture and expectations from women. I don't know what to think about all this. I'm kind of mind blown. Going back to the article, the biologist Carol Hooven, who I understand is going to be a speaker at the series, points out that testosterone levels in men peak in their 20s, and studies have consistently shown a correlation between testosterone and violence, as well as correlation between testosterone and competitiveness. These phenomena have an evolutionary basis. In the ancestral human environment, young men had to stand out in order to obtain mates, a dynamic that long predates humanity itself. Over the past few decades, biologists have found that maleness and femaleness are rooted in something very simple: how quickly the two sexes can reproduce. Biologists refer to this as the maximum reproductive rate. In short, the maximum reproductive rate for females is much slower than for males. Among humans, women are constrained to approximately 30 some gestrations in their lifetime, assuming an extreme situation of near continuous pregnancy for from roughly age 13 to menopause. In contrast, men can potentially father a far larger number of offspring. Look at it this way: an average man produces 255 million sperm per ejaculation. Oof. Yeah. Think about that next time you're gonna jerk off. 255 million. By contrast, women produce only 400 eggs in their entire lifetime. Overall, across and average man's lifespan, he produces 3.6 billion times more sex cells than the average woman. If you lined up one man's lifetime sperm production, head to tail, it would circle the earth twice, while a woman's eggs would circle a ping pong ball once. Thanks for that, I guess. To put it in somewhat crudely, sperm is cheap and abundant, and eggs are expensive and precious. Thus, the producers of sperm compete to appeal to individuals who produce eggs. Okay. So then, like, that's why we're trying to. It's like, I guess, women. It's like a desirable commodity in the eggs. And all right, let's continue with your theory, Rob. Males produce this massive overabundance of sperm in the hopes of offering it to females, but the vast majority of females are distinctly uninterested in what the vast majority of males have to offer. Females, on average, are choosier than males about whom they are willing to partner with, and so there is sharp competition among males to stand out, to be favored, and to be chosen. Interesting. So we are the ones who are being chosen because what he's saying is that a man will go for anything. So thus the whole competitive, okay, Jesus. This gives rise to increased conflict between males. Duh. Okay. To be clear, this competitive behavior doesn't necessarily occur consciously. Many human behaviors operate at the pre-attentive level. Most of the time, we don't hold an explicit mental model of how our behaviors might benefit us. We aren't always aware of how our actions might lead to an increased likelihood of obtaining resources or winning social allies or attracting romantic partners, any more than a spider weaving a web can visualize the end product that results from doing what comes naturally. Differences in propensity for physical confrontation have resulted in sexual dimorphism or distinctions in physical form between men and women. For instance, the shoulders of boys and girls are of equal size until adolescence. At puberty, though, shoulder cartilage cells in males respond to testosterone, causing them to expand. Increased testosterone also results in the thickening of the male brow, ridge, and skull in order to withstand damage from attacks by other males. Oh shit! So this is also biological. Plainly, in the ancestral environment, men with relatively thin skulls were less likely to survive violent encounters compared with men with greater bone density, who were more likely to survive, find romantic partners, and produce offspring. The wider shoulder, larger arms, the greater bone mass of male human appears to be the result of intrasexual conflict or male-on-male violence. All right, if you see a guy with wide shoulders and who's just fit and big, it means their ancestor probably, one, beat up a lot of guys, two, got laid a lot. So... yeah. I mean, look at my shoulders. Not there yet. Intriguingly, yeah. Some evolutionary researchers have argued that human male secondary sex characteristics evolved not to attract females, but rather to compete against other males. Yeah, but why are you competing with them, right? To get female attraction. Consider the example of beards. Why do males develop facial hair during puberty? Evidence is mixed about whether women find beards attractive. Some women like them, others don't, and for others, it depends. But there is clear evidence that men view other men with beards as more intimidating than clean-shaven men. Yikes, I gotta grow a beard, I guess. Or take deep voices. Women, on average, tend to think deep voices are attractive, but in comparison, men are even more likely to find men with deep voices to be intimidating. The same basic pattern has been found for masculinity. Women find it to be attractive up to a certain extent, but men report feeling threatened by large physicality in other males. Such research suggests that intersexual competition has given rise to male traits such as broad shoulders, large muscles, deep voices, and facial hair. Men evolved these traits not so much because women find them sexy, but more so because other men find them intimidating. Yeah, but like they find them intimidating, so when you fight with them, they are already they have like a psychological disadvantage because they think that, oh shit, I'm gonna lose, and they lose, and then it's the guy who has a beard that gets laid, not because he has a beard, but because he fucked the other guy up. Anyway, I mean that's what he's saying. I'm not saying I believe this, but come on, dude, it's like this. You're not making sense, dude. As psychologist Steve Stewart Williams has written, secondary sex characteristics appear to be more like deer's antlers than peacock's tails. The peacock's tail evolved to attract female peahens, but male deer evolved antlers not to impress female deer, but to compete with other males. Why are they competing though? Again, the same logic seems to apply to the characteristics of human males. Men develop specialized human physical features for the specific purpose of intimidation and competition against other males. This is why guys often show off to each other before fights by puffing out their chests and expanding their arm muscles. Yeah, you can observe this behavior during weigh-ins for boxing and mixed martial arts competitions. Definitely gotta check out Conor McGregor doing that. He's the best at it. So I'll let you do that. Last paragraph of this section. Males possess physical attributes and a psychological disposition that facilitate violence, as well as physique that is uniquely equipped to withstand physical harm. In the ancestral environment, young men who were more adept fighters could deter other males from obtaining romantic partners and were often more successful in attracting partners themselves. Today, even in the peaceful Mexican society, wrestling matches are organized to rank males by their capacity for violence. This is sad. All right. This brings us to a key question. What are the roots of the young male syndrome? Why do these striking sex differences and impulsivity, risk-taking, and violence exist? To answer these questions, we must understand the importance of social status. I'll use a definition from the psychologist Cameron Anderson, who characterizes status as the respect, admiration, and voluntary deference individuals are afforded by others. When people defer to us, or offer us respect, admiration, or praise, or allow us to influence them in some way, that's status. It is a resource as real as oxygen or water. In a widely cited 2012 study, Cameron Anderson and his colleagues found that sociometric status, defined as respect and admiration from peers, is a stronger predictor of well-being than socioeconomic status. Moreover, a 2015 study, also led by Anderson, found that across 123 countries, people's well-being consistently depended on the degree to which people felt respected by others. Attainment of status or its loss was the strongest predictor of long-term positive and negative feelings. Other studies have found that people report experiencing more envy toward people who are held in high social esteem compared to people who have lots of money. Put it differently, Status is a stronger generator of envy than material affluence, again indicating just how important status is to people. The desire for status is often viewed as tawdry or unserious. Unserious, okay? Many people resist the idea that status is so important, but they don't resist equivalent terms. If you say you want a job promotion for the status, you might be judged harshly. But if you say you want to be promoted because you want respect, that's often regarded as an appropriate desire. Yeah, when was the last time someone came up to you, or like if you're a manager, I don't remember, I was like, or like heard your colleagues say, I want to be promoted because I want respect. No, I want to be promoted because I want fucking money. But I think I'm gonna, I guess maybe that's a pro tip. Maybe I wasn't on the inside and now I know. Next time I'm gonna ask for a promotion, if I get hired anywhere, I'm just gonna say, yo, I want respect. Give me a higher salary and a better title. Because then I could fuck a woman. No, I'm not gonna say that. But that's what he says, right? Respect, status. Anyway, these two terms though mean roughly the same thing. To this extent, recent scholarship has found that status is far from shallow or unsophisticated. Indeed, it is complex and worthy of careful attention. Status is something that lives in the minds of other people. This explains why researchers have found that when two men have an argument on the street, the presence of a third person, a witness, doubles the likelihood that the encounter will escalate from a verbal altercation to one that involves violence. Especially when that other... Okay. The New York University professor or a psychiatry of psychiatry, James F. Galligan, has spent 3 decades studying the causes of violence. He found that, quote, time after time, men give the same answer as to why they assault or kill, because he disrespected me. In this context, disrespect essentially means that the target lowered or attempted to lower the aggressor's status. Psychologists have found that social status can be broken down into 2 different types: dominance and prestige. Dominance is evolutionarily older and more commonly observed among animals. Dominance in humans is associated with narcissism, aggression, and hostility. Under the dominance framework, status is attained by instilling fear in others through coercion, intimidation, and displays of brute force. Humans and other animals confer status to dominant individuals because of what the individuals can do to them: inflict costs, pain, humiliation, injuries, disfigurement, violence, reputation, destruction, and so on. As an example, Joseph Stalin obtained status through dominance. Yeah. While dominance can confer benefits, it is often associated with instability and tension. In her illuminating book on pride, why this adjective was unnecessary, I think. Anyway, the psychologist Jessica Tracy has written that dominant people pay for their less kindly road to status by incurring the dislike and even hatred of their fellow group members. And for many of us, this price is simply too high. We'd rather be low on the totem pole than be perceived as arrogant and domineering. Speak for yourself. Then there's the second type of status, which is prestige. This is evolutionary, more recent, and pervasive across human societies. Prestige is associated with stable self-esteem, social appearance, and being well-liked. Prestige is freely conferred to individuals based on their knowledge, skills, or success. We confer status to prestigious individuals because of what these individuals can do for us, provide us with benefits, teach us something useful, entertain us, grant access to resources, bolster our own status by being associated with them, and so on. As an example, the late physicist Stephen Hawking attained status via prestige. To be clear, dominance and prestige are not always entirely separable. In some cases, the two can be combined. For instance, depending on the political climate, in brackets, military members and police officers are often considered to be both dominant and prestigious. There is a lot of variation across time and culture regarding how humans pursue status. Under a prestige framework, social rank is based on differences in skill and value domains. Among hunter-gatherers, these include activities such as fishing, hunting, warfare, tool-making, navigation, storytelling, medicine-making, child-rearing, and so on. Child rearing kind of stands out because that's a thing that in hunter-gatherer societies usually was done by women, and they all do it. So I don't know if kind of why that gives you prestige, but anyway. In industrialized societies, symbols of prestige include job titles, education credentials, scholarly citations, luxury automobiles, and access to exclusive nightclubs. Because not everyone is equally talented in all value domains, status disparities inevitably emerge. Compared to dominance, prestige offers rewards that are equally compelling or even more so. Prestige signifies a different and more positive some form of social currency. In both non-industrialized and developed countries alike, prestige serves as an effective mode of acquiring status through skill, contribution, or specialized knowledge rather than coercion or force. The core reason why our human ancestors cared about status and passed this desire onto us is because it was directly tied to the ability to maintain critical resources, secure social allies, attract romantic partners, and ultimately the likelihood of producing offspring. Humans are not all equally kind, intelligent, healthy, ambitious, resourceful, attractive, empathetic, generous, and so on. Men and women are not interchangeable in terms of their desirable traits. The variation gives rise to competition for desirable partners. Generally, men who accumulate status and power are not confined by institutional rules or strong social norms, have more female partners than ordinary men. As the Harvard biologist Richard Wrangham, I hope I'm saying his last name right, has written, if a male wins power, he will tend to use it to mate with as many females as possible. Yeah, we got it, I think, right? Like, understood? Everyone, by this point, fucking 51 minutes into me reading out this lecture, which was given publicly. If you prefer listening to Rob, then go ahead, but I think I'm just having fun. Anyway, in most post-agricultural societies throughout history, such as among the Aztecs, Babylonians, Chinese, Egyptians, Incans, Indians, and Romans, harems of hundreds of women were the norm for kings, emperors, and pharaohs. The largest number of children that any man has ever had is 888. What? This individual was a Moroccan emperor named Ismail the Bloodthirsty, who reigned from 1672 to 1727. Equivalently, I'm curious, like, he even registered that he has that many kids? Imagine having almost 1,000 kids. Wild. You gonna play with them? Like, what kind of gifts are you gonna give them? Do they share gifts? Do they share toys? Let's not get into that. Equivalently, powerful women throughout history, such as Cleopatra, did not accumulate large harems of hundreds of attracting young men. Good point. They could have, but they didn't. To be clear, because they could have, like, she could get laid anytime. Like, she could get any guy. And I guess the king, like, even though he's the king, the guy Ismail, he still wouldn't be able to have all these kids if he didn't imprison all these chicks. That's what he's saying, right? Like, it's so hard for men to get that attention, and they're, like, women are choosy, that, anyway, I mean, why doesn't he explain this? Anyway, to be clear, not all powerful males followed this specific pattern. Alexander the Great never showed more than a pressing interest in women and fathered just a single child by the time he died at 32. But Alexander bucked the trend. Yeah, but we all know Alex was gay. A 2016 study, I don't know that, but like, I assume like that would make sense. I'd like just like chain logical. He just said like this whole article 53 minutes in. A 2016 study of 33 non-industrial small-scale societies found that in humans, men's status, as indexed by wealth and political influence, is positively associated with several reproductively relevant outcomes, including a number of sexual partners, number of offspring, and number of offspring surviving into adulthood. In modern societies, men who obtain high levels of income or occupational prestige are more likely to find a romantic partner and have children. A study from 2019 found that a man at the top of the earnings distribution has more than 90% chance of obtaining a committed romantic partner. Gold diggers. In contrast, for a man at the bottom, less than 40% find one. In most societies, successful men try to convert their high status into reproductive success. Of course, human culture is diverse and varied, and constraints and powerful men can inhibit their impulses. Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, who together possess more wealth than the bottom 50% of Americans combined, each have only 3 children. Yeah, but I'm curious, how many times did they get laid? That's the actual question that should be answered in the statistic. Elon Musk, currently the richest man in the world, is prolific. Is seen as prolific with 11 children in total, but his fertility is on par with the median woman in Massachusetts in the 17th century. At that time, family sizes of more than 10 children were common in New England. To be clear, the quest for an increased romantic for increased romantic opportunities is not the only reason why men seek status. The desire to attract women is often unconscious, with no direct link to the emotional systems that drive men to triumph in conflicts against male competitors. Rather, men are inclined to seek status for its own sake, even in scenarios where local norms limit their ability to obtain multiple romantic partners. Acquiring wealth and status is intrinsically satisfying, even if it never leads to increased romantic appeal. Keep saying that to yourself. Human males appear to have a general program installed that propels them to stand out among other males, even if no women are present, as is the case in prisons. Okay, interesting. Besting others is often a reward in itself because in the ancestral environment, victory was so closely tied to reproductive success. There we go. So in the end, it's like same instincts. Like it all goes back to impressing women. So I guess this point doesn't bring in any nuance. Nevertheless, if given a contrived choice between material prosperity but permanent celibacy, or material impoverishment accompanied by abundant romantic interest from numerous women, the majority of young males would prefer the latter. So that means being poor and getting laid instead of being rich and being a celibate. In other words, most guys would prefer to be poor but romantically appealing rather than rich but romantically shunned. We're so doomed. We got brainwashed. This discussion about status raises another important question. If men, to varying degrees, intrinsically desire status and its accompanying benefits, why are so many young men now disengaging from education and employment, two historically reliable paths to obtaining respect and admiration? I think the answer is porn, but let's see. Plus VR and all that stuff. Men now make up only 40% of college students, a gender gap that has been growing for decades. In the next few years, 2 women will earn a college degree for every 1 man. Today, 1 in 6 American men between the ages of 25 and 54 are unemployed. Whoa. Or out of the workforce altogether. This amounts to roughly 10 million men, a number that has more than doubled since the 1970s. There used to be economic incentives to work, but in rich societies, it is becoming less necessary for survival. There used to be social incentives to work, but people are generally less apt to praise young men for working or condemn them for being jobless. There used to be romantic incentives to work, but a man with a job is less appealing than he would have been in previous decades. Very few young men are inclined to expend the effort necessary to strive and improve and advance in education and employment without at least one of these external incentives. Yeah, because you open the floodgates. Emancipation and letting women get an education and join a workforce means that kind of they don't see it as impressive if a guy has a job and is making some money. Then you have guys just dropping out and giving up because, hey, what else should I do to get laid? I mean, that's just what I'm reading out here. It's not what I'm. Anyway, moreover, today men have entertaining digital devices. Yay, bingo, on the spot, bullseye, porn, video games, internet pornography, and a variety of other avenues. And I think it's sad. Like, I'm not a fan. I think, yeah, porn fucks you up. And a variety of other avenues to facilitate simulated status attainment and sexual gratification. As an analogy, many young men will not travel to the grocery store and then cook a nutritious meal when they can satisfy their hunger by ordering fast food on Uber Eats. Ultimately, artificial junk food is less satisfying than real ingredients, but convenience combined with the absence of external incentives to prepare a meal means that a growing number of individuals are opting for convenience and immediate gratification. Young males are inevitably going to try to obtain status, whether in the real world or in a digital one. But anthropological and psychological evidence indicates that people whom young males wish to impress, such as peers, high-status individuals, respected authority figures, and, of course, young women, have a lot of influence as to which activities confer status. If we don't want to see young men fall prey to the worst expressions of the young male syndrome, we must be intentional in guiding the avenues through which they seek status. If parents, caregivers, educators, peers, cultural trailblazers, potential romantic partners, and other influential members of society overlook the important roles they play, then males will lack the guidance they need to opt into productive paths to prestige and will either take a path of dominance or drop out of society by playing virtual status games that have no real world benefit or contribution. I guess, is that why all these young kids want to become influencers? Is that why I am doing this? Recording a weird podcast / press review just to get attention, right? Maybe. Am I going to get laid from this? Highly unlikely. As I document in my forthcoming book, going back to the article, in my own life, enlisting in the military redirected the bleak trajectory I was on as a teenager who grew up in foster homes and barely graduated from high school. Then, the reason I made the decision was that two older men for whom I had a great deal of respect strongly recommended this option to me. One was my best friend's father, who was a veteran and retired police officer. The other was my history teacher, who had served in the Air Force before transitioning to career in education. Returning to the story I opened with, my two moms, these two hardworking women who did their best to care for me under trying circumstances, were the first to introduce the idea of manhood to me as an achieved status that must be earned through effort and contribution. One core lesson I've drawn both from my own unusual life, okay, get over yourself, and from a close reading of the relevant research is that young males desire guidance and are deeply responsive to it. Yeah, they yearn to know how to earn the cherished rewards of respect and admiration. The energy and ambition of young men can be channeled into positive directions. I hope so. But if boys aren't exposed to positive examples of masculinity in their personal lives, they will look for it elsewhere. In contemporary Western societies, parents, teachers, coaches, local community leaders, and other high-status figures used to raise boys to become men, imparting lessons about personal responsibility, hard work, relationships, and obligations. Today, in the absence of such guidance, many young boys are being raised by viral TikTok influencers peddling diluted and ungrounded conceptions of masculinity. I wonder who is he talking about? One guy comes to mind, but I think we all know who he is. The guy who's been fighting in cages, and now, what was his fucking name? We all know who he talking. Yeah, anyway. No, not Scott Galloway. Although he's also bold. High status individuals have a societal responsibility to guide young men towards constructive avenues for status acquisition. By doing so, they not only help to mitigate the risks associated with the young male syndrome, but also contribute to the cultivation of a more balanced and harmonious society. and I'll leave it at that. Thank you. That's it. Andrew Tate. Shit, that was the guy on TikTok. I wanted to, yeah, but I guess you all guessed it. It's a little two-paragraph thing where says like he was pleased with the turnout, 300%, 200 more watched, live stream. Anytime someone says they learned something from me is gratifying. Before the lecture, I have succeeded despite difficulty in my life. But yeah, he just gives more context to his life. But one factor was, in fact, the young male syndrome. My decision to enlist in the Air Force at the age of 17 was not well thought out at all. It was impulsive to join. It was impulsive to join the military in 2007 in the midst of two wars. I didn't give it much thought other than a couple of suggestions from older men I respected, a sense of adventure, and a bit of desperation. That was my first step in reorienting the direction of my life. Cool, Rob. I think it's an interesting lecture, right? But I think it's way too fucking long. The examples are cool, but anyway, what do you think? Because it kind of frightened me. Like, oh, we were doing all this, we're chasing all this status, prestige, money, just to get laid, and now look, there's porn, there's VR, all that stuff, and guys are just giving up. Like, we must find some other way to motivate guys to get out of fucking bed other than trying to impress a chick to suck their dick, right? Let's see. Let's see what happens. Let's see, some of the comment section is always cool. Brilliant from Annie. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it's fucking long. 1 hour. Longest press preview I've ever done. Hope you enjoy this, or like, I guess no one has made it that far. But if you did, I'm gonna let you in on a secret. No, I won't. I mean, there's so many things. Let's call me, email me, let's chat. Let's see if we can make men great again. Bye. Oh, actually, no, go back to the quote of today, because we always end with that. Do not fear the winds of adversity. Remember, a kite rises against the wind rather than with it. Yes. Bye.